So no slides. I'm sure you can get rid of it. So our next speaker is Monterey County Supervisor Glenn Church, whose district the fire occurred in and who has been very engaged in working with the community to understand this fire and think about the future. And he will share some thoughts on the fire and next steps. So thank you.
Good, well, it's morning still. Good morning, everybody. I first want to really start off by just really giving my gratitude to the scientists around here in Moss Landing, to everybody in Amber, from Kirsten to Ivano, who I had the real pleasure of going out with a few days after the fire when he was doing some of his testing, and getting a perspective that I wouldn't have outside of that. But, it's been your work, your persistence, your perspective, which is unique and critical and is very, very necessary for us to truly understand what's happened here. Because this is not just the worst industrial accident in Monterey County's history, which it was, but it's also the worst incident of this kind in the world. And I don't think we're learning all the lessons that we need to learn from that. I mean, we need clean energy for the future, and batteries are the way to do that, but they need to be safe, and we need to learn that lesson. And that I think I have found personally, and I think a lot of people have found personally frustrating and in this whole process. So I want to give a little background on the regulatory climate and the situation, our understanding where we're at in here, and understanding, from a county's perspective. I'm going to give my personal opinion on a lot of things out here, and then I want to share some of the counties, which is of course going to be a little bit more reserved. But when we have accidents like this that happen, counties and cities, local jurisdictions turn to states for technical assistance. For example, we do not have a toxicologist on hand employed by the county because we don't need one full time. When you have an unusual circumstance that develops, we go and expect to get assistance from the state to provide that. And then, I will say, in my opinion, what has happened through this whole thing is that the state, the Department of Toxic Substances Control, and other agencies have not really provided that kind of background and that kind of support that we expected to have. And Ember itself is helping to fill in some of those gaps. We were forced months afterwards to hire a toxicologist to examine information and put it up. And that wasn't until May. I mean, by that point, most of this, the data you could collect is already lost and gone. So before I get into a little bit of the regulatory aspect and where the county's going at this point, what we're trying to do, I want to address the Terraphase report, which I'm sure everybody is aware of, and is kind of wondering, well, what does this really mean? And I do want to state that it was requested on March 13th on 2025 by the county to Vistra that they do a report, that they do a study on this. This was really 2 months after the fire, and that's when we made the request. Vistra said that they would. They got to hire their own contractor. They got to develop up the report, but we felt it was important to put some of that onus upon the entity that was responsible for this. And what was asked of them, and it's important to understand in this report that came out, because some people have taken it to view in the media. It's been come up reported like this is conclusions that be made. This was a PAA. A PAA is a preliminary environmental assessment. That's what we have before it's been released, a preliminary environmental assessment. It is not something that takes in and has accumulated all the information saying, oh, this is it, there's no problems at all involved. I'll just kind of read here on exactly what happened, so I make sure I get all the language right. But it was the Environmental Health Bureau that directed that Vista prepare a community sampling plan for review and acceptance, and have that sampling conducted in accordance with state agency review plan. And then it prepared a PEA equivalent report. The Environmental Health Bureau did not mandate or direct which environmental consultant was required to do that work on behalf of Vistra, and Vistra hired Terraphrase Engineering directly as a consultant to complete, the directives of the Environmental Health Bureau. And of course, that testing that was done was started in May, about 4 months after the event. A lot of that material there was, or as report even states, was washed away. Yes, I think that report is, does give us some important information. It does address long-term. I mean, if they were finding significant amounts in the soil that were there of some of these semi-metals, then that would be important to know that. They did not find that. But I don't know if that's really a surprise, because as Dr. Aiello had pointed out, there's a thin layer over there. There's a thin layer there. That thin layer was gone. What happened to that thin layer? It had an impact. We know there were mosquitoes that died out along, on Dolan Road, the mosquito abatement district, when they did testing. I know one of my constituents had testing done on a donkey and a horse that she owned. One of them eats grass. The other one has some intestinal issues and has to eat hay. She did testing on both of those. The one that ate grass had elevated levels of metals. So it's clear when you look around that thin layer got into the ecosystem. To what degree? Nobody knows. I know this is what Ember is talking about today, is addressing and coming to, and that is something that still has to be resolved and worked on out. I think we keep really keep in mind that this report that came out here from Terraphrase is coming from the party responsible for this. Now, Terraphrase might be an independent company doing this, but I think we all know that sometimes you have to take these reports with a little bit of hesitation because of who's paying for them and who's writing it down and preparing that. And I know Dr. Aiello has a response that he's put together, recorded of it, and I know I've talked to the county, and they're going to put that up there with that because it's important. It's important we have all perspectives on this and understand it. So I really wanted to be able to go forth and address this and bring this up because it's kind of the elephant in the room, an unexpected elephant in the room in the last week. For myself, as I did not know this was coming at that point. So I want to touch upon the battery ordinance that the Monterey County is working on at this point and where we're going on to this. I know the county started on this last summer, and it was moving pretty slow. So I decided last fall to put what's called a referral to the Board of Supervisors, which is basically it's sort of like introducing a bill, you would say, in Congress. It's something to spur something on or to lead to an ordinance or so. And then in that, it was to request that we come back with a battery ordinance within a year, because it's important we have something locally here, something in case there's some further expansion or some other entity wants to come in somewhere in the county and do something. What Monterey County's been working on at this point was it did go through and it assessed what other counties are doing around the state, and has a list of that. That information is kind of put together some rough guidelines on there. But we're also just in the process of, and this has been a little difficult to find, the proper kind of consultant to work with on this. We've had a few that kind of fell out of the process on the way, but we're in the process now of finalizing one. And once that's finalized, then we're going to be able to move ahead here very rapidly. There'll be a technical advisory committee set up that will include a number of county people and others and members of the community as well, to help draft up what we hope is going to be an appropriate and a proper ordinance onto this. And there are going to be some public outreach meetings as well, so there will be plenty of opportunity for the public to be engaged from all aspects to take the input into here. And one thing, I want to make sure that this gets through, and so we have this in place because, and apologies to any of my colleagues from Santa Cruz County, but we don't want to end up like Santa Cruz County is in the situation, which is basically where, they've had an ordinance. I know it's not in place right now. They've had an entity want to come in and establish and start to do things. And then it's going to go and bypass that entire county. And that's what makes us developing, or Santa Cruz County or us or any other county in the state, a real challenge on having local control on these issues. And that really rests with this piece of legislation that was passed a few years ago called AB 205. Let me take a step back first. The first thing to realize is that for utilities, all utilities, they are regulated by the state. Local jurisdictions have very little control on utilities. You have what happened out here is you're basically looking at the permits that were allowed was essentially grading permits, fencing, making sure that the building that were housing, house these batteries was up to standard, up to code. It was a building originally built in the 1940s. Things along that. I think the racks where the batteries were on, the county had looked at. The county does not have that technical experience and does not give the permits for the actual construction of the batteries and how they're laid out that way. That is the responsibility of the state. The state does that, not just these batteries. It does it with every single utility around. If PG&E wants to go through and trim trees, they don't have to get a permit from the county to do it. They can just go and remove a tree if they want to remove a tree. If a local fire department says, we think this tree's a hazard, can you remove it? They don't have to listen to that. They listen to the state. It's important to realize this as we go on. But what happens with AB 205 is it takes it a step further. It goes through and allows any battery facility to completely bypass a local jurisdiction, go straight to the California Energy Commission, and once they submit an application in 270 days, they can get approval or denial at that point. Yes, there's supposed to be some community involvement and there's supposed to be some community input, but there is no way that a decision being made in Sacramento is the same impact as a decision being made in Salinas or Santa Cruz. It does not have that input. We do not have that kind of contact with the people making the decisions as we do locally. And so that is the real challenge. And I'll point to Santa Cruz, which developed a very strong and good ordinance. But it's so strong and so good, the company doesn't want to follow through with it. So they bypass. So we're stuck here in a situation where we need to have input. We know these entities will go locally to us first. But how do you put together a really structured, positive, strong, good ordinance that will respect the special needs of, for example, Monterey County and Moss Landing Industrial Zone here, which is a prime area for batteries, which for its environmental, its population, its business needs. How do you go through and address all that? When if you get a little bit too strong, the other side could just walk out the door and go somewhere else. That's a problem. That's a real problem. And that's the real challenge we face. So happy to take any questions.
Really appreciate you making the time to join us at the symposium, and you've been engaged with Ember for a few days after the fire onward, so that support has meant a lot.
Absolutely, absolutely.
We do have time for some questions, maybe Becky first.
While the California Energy Commission may sidestep local ordinances, they will not sidestep fire codes. Local fire jurisdictions are able to create more protective fire codes than the state. What can Monterey County fire agencies do to create more protective fire codes?
I think that is a really good and important thing to bring up, and how we go through with this permit process. I'm not going to pretend to be a fire expert onto this. And that, I think, it touches upon, it probably shouldn't be put into the ordinance because they can bypass the ordinance. But it is something that I think this technical advisory committee needs to address. It needs to be raised. And we need to look at, I think you raised, it's a really good perspective on how to address this, is that you just don't go head on with it. Maybe sometimes you angle off to the side and kind of do a little flanking onto it so that they have to address it in some manner.
Yeah, Becky brings up a good point. If these agencies can sidestep, our local ordinances, then the answer really at the state level, we need to have an umbrella that covers these operations so that these companies are not shopping communities, and to pick the right, the community that is easiest to get into and sidestep these other requirements. So, of course, that's something you're looking at, and it needs to be coordinated with the state in order to do that. As it relates to emergency response planning, of course, and the fire districts, of course, that these were areas that were highlighted here in our situation that were woefully inefficient and deficient, from the emergency response standpoint. So I encourage you to, as you interact with the state, in order to have a coordinated effort, so that, yes, we do get appropriate types of energy storage facilities that are safely run and permitted in our county. And so that these companies don't have the ability to shop to go to San Benito County, go to Los Angeles County, no, that's not the answer.
I agree with you, although I do not have a lot of confidence in the state right now at this point through this. And there's a lot of, I think it's really split a lot of people who want to have clean energy into two camps. There's those who say, yeah, we want to have clean energy, but there's a lesson to be learned here. And there's others who'll say, yeah, we want to have clean energy. Let's forget about this and let's pretend it never happened. And unfortunately, I think that's what the real direction that the state has taken onto this thing. They wanted to shove it under the ground as quick as possible. I and Assembly Member Don Addis, when the fire sure happened, called for immediately an independent investigation. A week later, a few days later, the governor said yes onto that. It was given to the California Public Utilities Commission. They haven't come up with results yet. We don't, so I understand what you're saying. And if we can do that, that's great. But I'm afraid that we're kind of on our own to a great degree too. And Brian has a question.
So Glenn, you're one of 5 supervisors. We have a county attorney, we have a county administrator. So with that as preface, has the county issued any citations against the plant operator?
County hasn't issued any citation. I'm not sure exactly. What we would cite. I'm sure there could be potentially something onto that. But being that we, our regulation is very limited. Yeah. And I don't believe there's many state citations either.
This question came up from people logging in from all over the world. It's been a consistent question. What's been done? Have there been any citations?
No, I don't believe there's been any state citations.
Amanda, do you have questions on Zoom?
I do, that was one of them. Another one asks a detail about the task effort that you mentioned and when, like what date or what the target date is for getting that started.
For what effort?
They call it the task effort. I think it was the,
The TAC, sure.
Yeah.
The Technical Advisory Committee. Sorry. Yeah, once we get this thing finalized with the consultant, which I say has kind of delayed things a little bit, I think we're, weeks away, really, yeah.
So I live in the community of Castroville behind this power plant. And I'm just wondering if there's been any update to like a emergency response plan or like better evacuation orders next time or evacuation locations not so close to the fire, any of that.
Yeah, the Department of Emergency Management in Monterey County has been working on that. Actually, I think we might have something this Tuesday coming before the Board of Supervisors. Upon that, I did see something that was the draft that came in, but I think we have something coming in this Tuesday. There were already some changes that were done because one of the concerns that happened was, we had this alert system, and the alert system was done, and then we had another fire come up, and it was just sort of spotty a little bit. So we changed our alert system for this, and we haven't had an incident since then. But it's basically set so that any phone within a radius of here will get dinged. So that was done very early on after a couple of missteps onto there. It's every emergency is a little different, and you got to kind of calibrate for that then afterwards.
Amanda, are there more that?
there is one, I'm not familiar with this, so I hope the wording is enough to give detail. It says, Supervisor Church, the CEC has requested that New Leaf Energy submit a complete feasibility study for alternatively installing the BESS currently proposed for 90 Minto Road instead at Moss Landing. What are your comments on that?
Well, there wasn't, not, you say instead of Moss Landing?
That's what it says.
Yeah, they were never coming to Moss Landing, but that's particularly what I was, referring to in Santa Cruz County. It was, New Leaf. Is it New Leaf or Green Leaf? New Leaf, yeah. It's another county, so I don't know all the details about that, but that's exactly what happened. They did not follow that county procedure and went to the California Energy Commission, which is, we want to have as much control as possible, but we want it to be meaningful control, and that's the question.
Supervisor, just right here.
Yeah.
Would you like to speak to, since it's come up in Santa Cruz, do you have?
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, Becky's probably more of an expert on it than I am, but we did have New Leaf come in to develop a battery storage facility at 90 Minto Road. 90 Minto Road is it's near Watsonville. It would take existing agricultural land and convert that into this battery storage facility. That's the first thing that I am concerned about. Secondly, there's schools that are very close to there. We have 50% of the children in Santa Cruz County living in that area in the Pajaro Valley. So that's very concerning to me. It's also really close to very important ecological lakes, College Lake, Pinto Lake. There's a couple other little lakes there, Kelly. So there's a whole host of reasons why it's not a great idea. The other thing is when they came to me to propose this and tell me about the project, they told me that there's a dearth of electricity. There's a need for electricity up on the north part of Santa Cruz, right? The west side of Santa Cruz. But yet they're proposing this facility in the Pajaro Valley where many hardworking, low income and vulnerable people live. The plant proposed is like right next to this community. And so anyway, we proposed a very strict, probably the strictest ordinance in the nation. And like Supervisor Church said, they didn't like our ordinance, and so they bypassed us and went directly to the state for approval. So that's where we stand now. We're sort of, there's an open, comment period right now, and so people are encouraged to give their comments about that particular plant. I think for people that are environmentalists, like we understand we need clean energy. It's just the siting of some of these plants where we know there are issues and problems that might hurt people and agriculture and ecological, and sensitive environmental habitats. These are things that we are concerned about, so I don't really know what the answer is and how to balance that, but, anyway, thanks for being here. The science today has been extraordinary, so I really appreciate all the work that you're doing.
Thank you. We are up at lunch. Maybe any closing thoughts for 1 minute and then.
No, I'll go back to my first comments. I just only want to thank you, all the other scientists here that have been engaged. We're really lucky to have this kind of technical, expertise right here. And the fortune of having such things as Dr. Aiello's, having tested out in this area previously, a few years earlier, as something to go with some background information. I mean, it was a unique opportunity, and it's a unique opportunity to have really learn more than we're doing. I wish we were getting more awareness from the state to make this move ahead, make this safe, because I'm just concerned there'll be other accidents. They may not be of this size, but there will be other accidents, and we need to be prepared. We need to understand what happened here. Thank you.
Thank you.